So let's click on the Folder Locations tab under the File section. Folder Locations is where default paths to the various locations required or used by Music Creator are set. The defaults will work fine, but you may change these if you wish. Most likely candidate for change may well be the project file settings. Just browse to the location that you want to use. If you have the luxury of more than one drive on your system, you may like to change the project folder to the NonSystem Drive. This is where audio data will be stored if you're using per project folders, and a dedicated drive will allow audio read and write operations a higher priority than if the operating system also needs disk access. We'll be looking at some of the data types such as templates and effects change presets elsewhere. Just remember that this is where the default locations are set. Next is the Audio Data tab. This contains all of the settings related to audio file settings. The Global Audio Data folder is where recorded audio files are stored either temporarily before saving if per project folders are used, or permanently if per project is not used. We'll look at the differences shortly. Again, it's a good idea to assign this to a non-OS drive for reasons already stated. Picture cache is where WAV file graphics are stored. Another important setting for per project audio is the Always Copy Imported Audio setting, which is best left checked for reasons we'll look at shortly. File bit depths are also set here. I mentioned bit depth earlier in the audio driver section, and I'm not going to get into a complex explanation about bit depth, but will explain the basics. Basically, bit depth is the amount of space allocated to store the digital representation of audio files. The larger the setting, the higher the resolution, the better the quality. There are 3 different settings here. Record is for audio that is recorded by Music Creator. Remember that currently no audio interface supports a bit depth greater than 24, and that's the figure I set here. Render is the depth used by rendering processes such as freezing synths. 32-bit is a good setting here, allowing almost lossless processing. Import is for any audio that you import to a project. As well as a specified setting, there's also an option to use the file's original bit depth. Per project audio I've already mentioned briefly, and this is probably one of the more important settings on this page. It's on by default and is probably best left on. In this state, all audio associated with a project is stored in an audio folder within the main project folder. This makes project backup and moving projects easy as everything is within the one folder. If this is deselected, audio is stored in the global audio folder mentioned earlier, making project mobility and backup more difficult as the audio is not copied with the project, so the original audio location needs to be available. BST Settings is where VSTs can be managed from. Paths to any VST folders on your system can be set here, as well as scan settings. Scan for VSTs on startup is best left checked, as this will ensure that any VSTs added between sessions are automatically added without having to scan manually. There are also options to scan existing and failed plugins, probably best left unchecked unless you need to run a scan to fix any missing or problematic VSTs. There's a button to manually run a scan, as well as reset plugins. BitBridge server configurations beyond the scope of this video. The Cakewalk ini file is there to allow changes to program behavior using specially named settings called variables. There's a list of available variables in the help file. In the advanced section are various options for file setup. Autosave is turned on from here. If both the time and changes fields are set to 0, it's effectively off. Changing either of these figures turns it on. A couple of things about autosave. First, it will not overwrite the original project. Instead, it creates a second copy of it that it maintains independently to the original. It also doesn't autosave while the transport's running, so there's no need to worry that a save is suddenly going to kill the audio engine halfway through the recording of your killer guitar solo. If a save becomes due while the transport is running, Music Creator saves as soon as playback stops. I personally like the security of a backup should the worst happen and the system crash before performing a manual save. Versioning forces Sonar to maintain several versions of a project. Each time you perform a save operation, a new version is created until a number set here is reached, and at that point, the oldest version is overwritten. This can also be a helpful option to use, as you can return to an earlier point in the project if you suddenly decide that some of the save changes that you've made aren't quite such a good idea. Ask before sending system exclusive relates to any MIDI sysx messages contained within a file. You'll be asked to confirm or cancel these messages being sent to any attached synths if this is checked. On startup, load normal template enables a starting point each time you load Music Creator without the need to name it first. Ctrl+N in the main view will also load the normal template in the same way as we'll see later. Always use offline help forces Music Creator 6 to use the help file on disk. If this is unchecked, the online help file will be used, but you'll need an internet connection for that.